MB. So I'm sure nowadays we are having 64-bit. So here SQL Server Express, and here if you see SQL Server Advanced.
Okay.
Okay, so I would say better go for a advanced. So it will have a management studio. So and also here if you see here management studio. So you select both the database engine as well as management studio. Select both
Okay.
and then start downloading.
Should we select the 84-bit one, Express, 86 or 64?
Yeah, 86 x86 is nothing but a 32-bit version. So yesterday when we were
No, I'm not
checking
talking
the
about that
system
one.
top.
The previous one which you selected,
Mm-hmm.
SQL Express one, you selected 84-bit, right? No, the bottom one. No, the next.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The next
Fifth
one,
one.
86. Yeah, you selected 86, right?
Oops. It should be 64.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it comes around total 1.1 GB,
Yes.
and then it will take us to download center, and then it will start downloading. So I don't think Naga and Navin is going to join. So we will continue our session.
Okay.
So if you want tomorrow, I mean not tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, what we can do is, so we can make you as a presenter so that we can see how you are, I mean in the session itself as a lab, in the lab we can do installation. So we will make you 1 or 2 people as a presenter parallelly so that we can see the installation progress.
Okay.
So meanwhile, you can get ready with the software and if required .NET framework as well. You try to have an attempt of installing SQL Server 2008 with Service Pack 2. So if you are not comfortable with that, so we will do in Wednesday session. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, Wednesday session. Okay.
Okay.
So do you have any questions till now? I mean, we were discussing about pre-requirements and feature selection and SQL Server database components. So
Actually, it's
yesterday
not a
what we
doubt,
did,
but like we just have a small request. When you're just explaining, when we get it like particular domains like where we're not familiar with because we are not computer science students. So can you just explain those?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, I'll keep that in mind, and while explaining, we'll do the same.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So while we are doing SQL Server installation, we will be selecting the required features. So for corresponding features, we will be having a service in our SQL Server. So, I mean, so services for those components. So I feel we are familiar with selecting the features and installing those features in our machine depending upon the compatibility. Okay, so you people try once at your home. So if you still encounter any issues while doing installation, so I can guide you by making you as a presenter, and we first thing as it's first. So we will make sure that all your systems have SQL Server in a day or two. So today we are going to do the configuration of the SQL Server instance. So what we are going to do and how we are going to do. Yesterday, before we wind up our session, so we just clicked finish button in our installation window, correct? So now I don't know whether my SQL Server installation components are loaded or not. How can I validate it? So how can I find what kind of SQL Server is there in a box? Let us say if someone gives, hope you are able to see my screen, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Yes.
Naveen, we just started our session, so we didn't miss anything. So few minutes back only we have started. So when we install SQL Server, as soon as we done with the SQL Server installation, the first thing we have to validate is services. Whether in the services, whether the corresponding future related services or service is loaded or not. So I'm going to services.msc, go to service run and type services.msc, or that is one way. The other way, start programs, my computer, right click, manage. Here services and application. In both the ways we can navigate to services panel. So in the services panel you search for SQL. So here if you see SQL Server 2008 INST2, SQL Server Agent INST2, okay, and browser. So as discussed yesterday, whenever we do a SQL Server installation, mandatory services are SQL Server Agent, and a browser. Browser is a server level service component. This will be loaded one for all the instances. That means even though if you are installing multiple instances on the box, SQL browser will be installed only one time for all the instances. If you select any business intelligent features like SSRS, SSAS, SS notification services, for them only one component, corresponding component for each feature, a service will be loaded. Similarly for full text and replication. We are clear in this. So from the services, I could able to make out here I have a SQL server with named instance called SQL Server 2008 INS2. So for my installation, I could able to see corresponding service 1, and this one we will discuss about what is started, what is automatic, what is logon type. So in the coming session we will discuss managing services, that is logon as, startup types, and these things we will discuss. And after that I'm going to folder structure. I have given E drive for my SQL Server installation. So there I have given D drive, program files, Microsoft SQL 2008 INS2. So yesterday we were discussing about what is 70, 80, 90. 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 stands for 2008. MS SQL 9 stands for SQL Server 2005. So here I could see in MS SQL folder I could see a few of the files. So folders backup, bin, data, install, jobs, log. So if I go to data, I could able to see few of the database files. So we will know all this, what are these files, and we will discuss all these about all these data files in details in the coming sessions when we go to next module, the databases. Currently we are doing a validation after our SQL Server installation. Now I could able to see the corresponding folder structure in my D drive. Okay. After that, if you want, you can see the same thing in your registry. So we will skip that and we'll go to start. all programs, Microsoft SQL Server 2008. Here you will see a management studio. Since while installing the shared features, we selected SQL Server Management Studio complete. So that's the reason the tool Management Studio is already installed. I'll be selecting it. So as soon as we select this, so here SQL Server name and authentication is required to connect to the SQL Server. What is a server name? So while doing SQL Server installation, I have selected as a named instance for the computer name plus the SQL Server name which we have specified. My computer name is let us check the computer name. Computer name is this. For that, I have to followed by the SQL Server name. So what name I have given? For that, I have given name as so this is my SQL Server instance name to connect. So if it is a default name, only this would be the SQL Server instance name. Currently, I have installed named instance. That's why I have given a computer name plus SQL Server instance name. I mean the name unique name which we have specified to SQL Server. And then coming to authentication. When I select a Windows authentication, the username and password is not highlighted. Here it is not. It will not allow us to specify what user and it will not ask us to write the password. The reason is I log into the box by providing credentials and I ran the management studio. Currently, this management studio was being executed by the user. Task manager, users, process. So are you able to see? I have highlighted one ssms.exe, the process ID 4872. Okay, it is running with the user. So that is the reason we are connecting with Windows user. It is not asking for user ID and password. If you observe one more thing here, the management studio.exe is being executed with the user. So what about the actual database engine? So the one which I am trying to show here is a tool that we use to connect to the database, that is called SQL Server Management Studio. That is a front-end application or a barrier between the client and server. The client, we are let's say we are client, the database is the server which we have installed is a server. By using SS Management Studio, SQL Server Management Studio, we are connecting to the database engine. Okay, so here ssms.exe is a client, that is Management Studio, that will help us to connect to SQL Server. If you see here in services, you will see actual database engine. Since the server is running on the machine, so I can able to find out as one of the process, that also as a process. So since it is showing only current users, I will make it as show process from all users. Okay, if you as soon as I select here SQL server.exe, SQL server agent.exe, now you can able to differentiate SQL Server SQL scrvr.exe and ssms.exe. ssms.exe is a tool that is being executed by user. Let's say if your machine and my machine are both in the same network. Okay, from your machine you could able to connect to this SQL Server instance by specifying the name, computer name and instance name. That means the server, SQL Server is available in my machine from the client, that is a barrier or a tool. By using a tool you can able to connect to the SQL Server by specifying the name. So these two are the two components. One is SQL Server EXE is a database engine. Management Studio is a component to connect the database server. Clear here? So if you see to distinguish that, we could see two processes for that. In Task Manager, we are seeing two separate processes for that. If you see here, this is running with different service account, not with the same user. Okay, I am taking this name. So I specified here. When I connect as a Windows authentication, so I am not specifying anything, I simply connected it. So if you see here in the left pane, you could able to see my SQL Server name and few folder structure, database, security, server objects, replication management and SQL Server agent with a small red cross mark. Okay. Now again I will go to connect. This time here I have given a name to my server name which I am going to connect, and then I select the other authentication mode, that is SQL Server authentication. As soon as I select SQL authentication, it is asking me to login and password. Can someone say what login name I can provide now? Login name and password. Any answers? Pooja? Sai, any guess from you, Brian?
Will it be administrator?
Yes, you are correct. Administrator, what administrator? If you remember yesterday while we are selecting the authentication mode, we selected mixed authentication mode, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. If we can go, not sure whether that summary file we can find or not, we can give it a try. So
yeah, it is mixed. If it is for Windows and Excel, it is mixed authentication.
What I am trying to show is the answer you told is absolutely correct. I have to accept it. You told you are connecting with administrator.
Hello?
So now what I am trying to show here is, yeah, is it Naga?
Yes, what time the session started? I thought like it's 10 o'clock.
It started at 9:30.
Oh.
No, Naga. So what we did, we are trying to validate the yesterday's installation. So after the installation, what are the things we have to validate? We are verifying. So no problem. I can cover one more time. Okay, just follow us.
Yeah, I do have some doubts on installation.
Sure. Give us 2 more minutes. So we are middle of one question. So once done, so I'll come back to you.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So previously when I ask what ID credentials I have to provide to log into my machine, I mean to say when I try to use Windows authentication here for the login. So previously when I select Windows authentication, it didn't ask. Fine, it has taken a user. When I try to connect with the SQL Server authentication, it asking for login ID and password. So I haven't logged into the SQL Server after the installation. This is the first time I'm connecting. So here, what ID I need to specify for this question? The answer was administrator. So here, the administrator was SQL Server built-in administrator. The SQL Server built-in administrator was named as SA.
SQL.
So if you see here, I have I have highlighted as SA. SA password. If you see here, it is not providing any password. So that is star star star. So here the login would be SA, SQL Server Administrator. SA. So yesterday when we are selecting authentication mode, we added current user and then a password for SQL Server Administrator. The SQL Server Administrator is called user is called SA, and the password we are providing, that is PASSWORD123. I think this is the one I have given. It's correct. If you see, I connected. Here you could able to see two connections. The connection 1 with Windows authentication, the connection 2 with the SQL authentication. Is that to both the connections connected to the same SQL Server instance, correct? We connected to same name, instance name, but the first one is Windows authentication, the other one is SQL authentication. Yes. So the reason why I have showed these two things is, yesterday while we are doing installation, I asked you one question: why I have to think of security considerations while doing installation, right? So because of this, after successful installation, who can and who needs to connect, those things we have specified while doing installation itself. If someone else try to connect, they cannot able to connect the SQL Server. Now apart from this current user and SQL authentication, anyone tries to connect to SQL Server, they cannot. So that's the reason we can able to consider the security consideration at the time of installation itself. So here we will expand the databases. As soon as we expand the database, we have system databases. So yes, so all these are after the installation. All these are expected. We will discuss all these in detail in coming sessions. Databases. Now we have validated our SQL Server installation in three panels. One is services.msc, where the corresponding services are loaded or not, and then folder structure we have verified, and then logs we have seen, and then we try to connect the database engine with Management Studio with both SQL authentication and Windows authentication. So these are the 4 ways we can validate the SQL Server installation. So do you have any questions? Okay. Okay, Naga, we'll come back to you. So you were telling like you have few questions in installation. You're still there?
Yeah. But my question is, I didn't see any .NET Framework 3.5 or any other version. I didn't see any .NET Framework files in my laptop.
Okay. Okay. That is what. So if the .NET framework is not available, so while at the time of installation, it will ask you to prompt.
అంటే ఆన్
So it will throw error. You try to run the install. It will says the pre-requirement .NET framework is not available in the machine. So in that case, it will ask two options: download and install, or else ignore the installation. If you ignore it, you have to download manually, and then you have to apply SQL Server again. Else, it will try to install from online if you connect to the internet.
Yeah, I'm trying to install from online, but still I cannot. I can download, but I cannot, install that.
Okay. Any idea what kind of error you are encountering? Is it a permission issue or what issue you are encountering
It's
while
not
installing .NET
showing
Framework?
any. It's not showing any error, but I
Okay.
see the files. But after I go through system, you told me yesterday, go through start and find it in a computer management, right? Uh, in the computer management, the service and applications. In the services, I didn't see the whatever I downloaded in my machine. I didn't see
Yeah.
that files.
Yes. So those components will be visible or loaded only after successful installation. Okay. So since the .NET Framework is not installed or not loaded, so you may not find in add or remove programs or services.msc. So that is expected behavior. So what we can do is tomorrow a couple of our resources they are having their subject classes. If other people are other having free time, we can have a half an hour or 1 hour session so that we can have a screen share and we can do the installation part. And the rest of the people on Wednesday we can do a screen share and we will try to load the SQL server on the machines as a lab so that we can save our time. Naga, how did you download the .NET framework?
Through Microsoft, I went, yeah, the same one.
Okay.
Here I typed .NET Framework 3.5.
3 part. Okay. So the .NET framework it will be a, like application. So here I think you are able to see my screen. Here I have a
Yeah, even I have
dump.
this one in, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you try to launch as a administrator, run as administrator. It will prompt you to proceed or not. Click on yes.
It's not going.
Yes, it's I think what is the voice on your machine? Without
It's
any
a Vista. I tried Windows Vista and Windows 8.12. Windows 8.
8.1.
Yeah.
Okay, sure, Naga. That one we will figure out. I think that is server level. The system level setting that you need to change. Something is blocking not to proceed the installation. That we will figure out.
Okay. Okay.
So we will continue our validation thing here. Uh, so so now we have validated. We have a successful SQL Server 2008 SQL Server instance.
Okay.
Any questions here? We have validated services and then folder structure. We try to connect SQL Server using Windows authentication, SQL Server authentication, and then the same components we can find in SQL Server registry settings. Ashwita,
Yeah.
are you fine?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yes. Now, yes, there is another component that is called SQL Server Configuration Manager. So by using SQL Server Configuration Manager, you can manage the SQL related services, and we can change the SQL Server service logon type, and the protocols can be selected, and network protocols can be changed. So here the network protocols, here two kinds of network protocols. One is server machine and client machine. So client is the one who is connecting to the server. Server is the host server. So if you consider in my machine currently, it is having a server and a client. The server is database engine, the client is management studio. So now we will see the configuration things by using SQL Server Configuration Manager. How to launch SQL Server Configuration Manager? Go to Start, Programs, All Programs, SQL Server 2008. Here you see a configuration tools. Expand the configuration tools. There, SQL Server Configuration Manager. Able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know whether there any latency in screen share and the voice. So if any that latency, please let me know so that I'll take a process. Okay. So here if you see SQL Server Configuration Manager local, here we have SQL services, SQL Server network configuration, SQL Server client configuration, and protocols for the instance. So these are the things we can operate, or settings can be configured by using SQL Server Configuration Manager. First thing is SQL Server services. If you see here you are able to see only SQL related services. What is the difference between the previous screen and this one? Here I kept both the screens. So what is the difference between these two?
It contains both automatic and manual.
Yeah, here in services you can able to see all application related, all components related, what all the services or hosts that are running on your machine. Bunch of services you are seeing in your services.msc. Whereas in configuration manager, it's customized, it is only for SQL Server. So there we are able to see only SQL Server related services. Apart from that, no other services. If you see here, SQL Server, SQL Server Agent, SQL Server Browser, no other services. So is this is one easiest way we can manage our SQL services rather than going to services.msc and find our services. Okay, so both are same in terms of services, both are same. Whereas in the server configuration manager, we can able to see only customized SQL Server services only. So you can manage your services either SQL Server Configuration Manager or services.msc panel. Okay, so here you are able to see the state as running or stopped, startup mode, what is logon, and process ID, what is the name of the service account. First we will see a SQL Server service, and we will right click it on it, and properties. A state can be a running state, it can be a stop state, right? Either it is running or it is stopped. See here, Start is currently it is running state, that's why start is not available. Stop state, pause and restart. Stop, what will happen? The services will not run. So I stop the services. What is the impact if the services is not running? So services is not running. What happened? Do you see any changes here? Previous screen and now? Here the entire the database, the instance went down. It came right, red mark. When you try to connect here, it will throw error. Since the service is not running, we are trying to connect that particular instance. So it will throw error. So it says we are unable to connect the SQL Server instance specified. Please check the status of your service, or you specify you verify whether you have given a correct name to connect or not. This is the generic error message we will get in multiple scenarios. So here I couldn't able to connect to my database engine. The reason is the service is stop state. So to work on SQL Server, the database engine service must be running state. And what is a pause? Stop means no one is able to connect it. Connect, right? So what is a pause? Now I went back here again. I could able to see those existing previous sessions, and the database is up as soon as it come to running state. Okay. Right. Now the question is, what is the difference between stop and pause? Any guess? Sirisha, can you try to give us some difference between pause and stop?
Stop means you're completely stopping the server to run the database.
Mm-hmm.
And pause, I think you're just delaying the service to run the database for some time.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
We will see. Okay, this time I am not stopping it and just pausing it. Okay, if you pause, if you observe the status of your SQL Server, previously when I stop it, it went to red and I couldn't able to connect. I got error like check your SQL Server is running or not, or check your name of SQL Server instance. Whereas past, it is nothing will happen to the connections which is already having. When I try to make a new connection, new database engine, I try to connect it again with the PSSWORD password 123. I try to make one more connection to the same SQL Server. The SQL Server service has been passed. No new connections will be allowed. So the existing connections will be remain connected to SQL Server. It will not allow new connections. So how can we say the existing connections are still working? Now when I try to make a new connection, it is not working, right? So I try to use the existing connection. So already here we have two connections, right? One is with Windows authentication connection, other is SQL and Windows. So if you see here, yes, here are you able to follow my mouse pointer, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So if
Yes.
you see here, if you see the mouse pointer, there is a SA51, correct? So SA51 is 51 stands for the speed session ID for that connection. If you select the Windows one, I'll connect a new query. See, when I try to make a new connection, it throws the error. So with the existing connection, that is session, the existing session is 51. I can able to make a connection. 51. I'm coming back here. The 51. If I run any query sp underscore help db, I will explain what is this. Everything I'll explain. Here it gave the result. So why I am not making a new connection? Why I am not able to uh, take any session with the new connection? That means currently I have passed. The user currently connect to the SQL server. They continue to proceed with their work. Once done, if they are come out of the SQL server, it will not allow new connections. Let me close this session. 51 is I am done. My work is done. Now I am trying to close. I haven't saved. I closed it. Now 51 is for SA previously. Now again I am trying to open new query. It gave me error saying that new connection is not allowed. Previously, before I passing the connection, I already opened Management Studio. I connected it and I am working on it. So once I am done with the work, I close the connection and I try to establish a new one. So now you can able to make a difference between pass and stop, right? Stop, it will kill all the connections, existing connections. Navin, are you telling anything? Okay. So when we stop the SQL server, it will terminate all the existing connections. When you pause it, the existing connections will remain same until it complete or until it himself come out or connection is disconnected, and it will not allow new connections. Clear? The difference between pause and stop. Next. The next one is restart. What a restart will do? What it will do a stop and then start. Restart is nothing but stopping and starting again. So currently my SQL Server instance is in a past state, so I'll be starting it. So the state is running state, or it is stop state, or it is a pause state. Either of these three states the SQL Server can be. And then start mode. A start mode will be a manual, automatic, or disabled. Here if you see in services, start mode. In start mode, you can able to see automatic, disabled, manual. When it is a manual state, whenever a restart happen, the service will not automatically will come up or it will start. It will not automatically start. You have to manually start it. Whenever you don't need to bring up the services at the time of Windows or operating system startup, you will keep it in a manual state. Disabled, permanently disabling it. Permanently in the sense currently we are not at all using. So it will, if you keep it as disabled, so it will not try to make a attempt it. The other one is automatic. Automatic, whenever the SQL Server restart happens, automatically while service starting up along with our Windows services, this service also will come up. It's kind of startup parameter. Clear? So these are the startup modes. We have startup states are either running or stopped or paused, and startup modes are manual, automatic, and disable. These are common for either SQL services or normal services, Skype services or Yahoo services, Google services. The state and startup mode log on as common for any services. And then coming to other one is log on as. Log on as. So what is a log on as? So to minimize the risk and to increase the security to our SQL server, we can make SQL Server to run under DBA owned or our organization owned service account, so that other people may not able to stop our service, stop the services, or they can try to malfunction the SQL Server. Let us say in a organization a server will be used multiple people, like Windows admins they will use, network admins they will use the same machine, DBA database administrator will use the same machine, right? Similarly, storage, backup admins, VMware team, multiple people will use, right? If the SQL Server service under services are running with a common account, they can come, they can start, they can stop, they can take advantage of it. Okay, so if you create a SQL Server administrator account, and then if you specify the service account as a login run as, so that you will own that service account and you will have more privileges to work on the particular SQL Server service. So that means here local service, here if you see currently the system is running as local system account. So if it, or else it will be running a NT authority system. Rather than this, we can specify our own SQL Server service account. So the service account should be a local administrator on your machine. So local administrator on your machine means if you go to local users and groups, in the groups you will see administrator. In that administrator, the logon service should be a member. So here I have three users. One is user 1, user 2. The user 2 with the name SQL service ACCP. So here I can keep this administrator user as a logon. So I will try to change service logon type. Currently it is running with local system account. I will go to this account. Currently it is running with local system account. So I will make it to this account. This account I have to specify the account name. The account name is, I am browsing it. It is SQL SERVICE ACCT. It's resolved. The name is resolved. I try to use it. Where as soon as I enter my username, service account username, it is asking for password. I gave user ID and password and trying to start it. Correct. Now the SQL Server is running state. If you observe here, now my SQL Server, this will cause the service to be restarted. Why? Password is incorrect. What is the password for this? Okay, I'll be creating a new user. I don't remember the password for that. User must change the password. I am removing it. I created a local user, new user for service account. Now it is just a user. So to make use of this user as a service account, it should be a member of local administrator. It should be a member of local administrator. I'll go to local administrator. I am adding that user. New check name. New user for SQL service. Check names. What is the name? Users. Take the user. We have to Control C. Groups. Built-in administrator. Add. Paste it. Result. Earlier I didn't use the correct name. Okay, now the new user for SQL Server service is the administrator. Okay, so what I am doing here is I am trying to log in as I am making my SQL service to run under my new SQL Server service account. So I am specifying the service account name. What password we have given? Again I forgot. Bear me a minute. I'll fix it. Set password. Proceed. All lowercase PASSWORD password 123. All lowercase PASSWORD 123. Password has been set. PASSWORD password 123. Apply. This will cause services to be restarted. So whenever we change any server level settings, that is changing the service or startup mode, so it requires a restart of SQL Server to make it effect. Restart, it will stop, it will bring down the services and it will bring up. Now if you see here, earlier it was running with local administrator. Now our services is changed to new service account. Okay, so by using configuration manager we can manage our SQL services the state can be managed. We can stop, start, pause. We can restart it, and we can set the startup mode either manual, automatic, and we can disable it. And also we can change the logon with the specific user. We can set by using configuration manager. So the same thing we can do from services.msc. This configuration manager is customized for only SQL Server related service accounts. Clear on this? Naveen, are you able to get it?
Yeah, I'm getting.
Yeah, thank you. The next one, as we discussed here, let me go back to PPT. From the configuration manager, so we can able to manage the SQL Server services and changing the service accounts by used by the SQL Server services. And the other one is managing SQL Server network protocols. Similarly, we can manage the client network protocols. Now we have seen how we can manage our SQL services and the account types. Now we will step ahead and we will see the network and client protocols, server client protocols. The next tab here is SQL Server network, and here SQL Server client protocols. Before we discuss on these two things, we will discuss a few things on network configuration protocols for SQL Server instance. Currently, when we select, as soon as I select, we are having 4 kind of protocols in SQL Server. One is shared memory, named pipes, and TCP/IP and VIA. Shared memory. So these are the 4 protocols SQL Server uses to make a connection between the client and server. So when I use my Management Studio to connect to the SQL Server, it will use any one of the protocol which we have. So here when I try to make a connection to the SQL Server, the connection is established. That connection is called, that connection has been taken place by using any one of this protocol, the shared memory, named pipes, TCP/IP, VIA. So we will see what are these protocols. By default, shared memory is enabled. If you see, the other 3 are in disabled state. So shared memory protocol is used when we try to connect the server locally. That means the server and the client both are in the same server. In this current scenario, my server is on the same machine, my client, that is Management Studio, is on the same machine. We are trying to connect to the server from the same server, same box. SQL Server, I mean to say server means SQL Server. I am trying to connect the SQL Server from the same box. That means both the client and the server are operating on the same machine. It will in the such scenarios, it will use the protocol shared memory. So by default, the shared memory protocol is enabled. If you see the properties, the property is enabled. No other settings for shared memory. It will use the shared memory resources to connect to the SQL Server. Coming to the TCP/IP protocol, this is the well-known protocol that the protocol being used by multiple applications to make a connection between the client and server. So in this, we use SQL Server IP and port number to connect it. When you are using TCP/IP protocol, it uses server IP and a port number to authenticate and to connect to the server. We will see currently it is in disabled state. I am making to enable. So all the server levels, most of the server level settings requires a SQL Server restart to make it effect. So when I try to change the protocol, TCP/IP protocol, it is asking me to restart the SQL Server. That will not affect until I do a SQL Server restart. So I just enabled it. I'm going to properties. So when I go properties here, just come back here, we will see the two things. One is a dynamic port, other one is static port. What do you mean by dynamic and static? Any answers? What is a dynamic? What is a static?
I think static IP address does not changes.
Correct.
Always the IP address will be the same.
Mm-hmm. Somewhat, I mean, that is correct, but not IP, the dynamic port and static port. So here what will happen, the IP comes to the server. So when we try to connect to the machine, if it is a SQL instance or named instance, we are depending upon the server name. So if you observe, we are giving computer name plus a SQL name, or else if it is a default instance, we will give a computer name. Correct. So a IP will be assigned to computer, not to the SQL server. Correct. So a port is assigned to SQL server. If you take any application, Google, Gmail is running on one dedicated port number. So when you try to connect, it will try to connect the server with the specific port only. Similarly, Facebook. A firewall is opens a particular port to authenticate a particular application. Similarly, for SQL Server, a default port will be assigned to authenticate from the firewall. Here, the default port number is 1433. This is default SQL port number. The default SQL port number is 1433. This is one of the interview question. So SQL default port is 1433. So here the other thing we are discussing about dynamic and static. So whenever the box reboot, a port number will be assigned to the SQL server. Static, it always same. We are predefined the port number to the SQL server in advance. Even though if it is a restart, it's not going to change. Statically, it will be static. Whereas coming to the dynamic, it will change the port number whenever the box is getting rebooted. Dynamically, a random number will be assigned to the SQL server. So currently here, if you see, the dynamic port number is 0 because the SQL server, the port number TCP/IP port, the protocol was a disabled state. That's the reason when my machine is restarted, no port is assigned. So if I restart my machine, now I have enabled it. If I start my services, if I restart my box, a port number is assigned to my SQL server as well. So on what basis, whether the port is set to dynamic or static, a port is being assigned. If I keep it as static, so I will be providing a port number to the SQL server. If it is a dynamic, my operating system firewall settings take a control and it will assign a port number to the SQL server. The default port number for SQL server would be 1433. If the port is available, 1433 port is available, SQL server, my firewall will try to assign 1433 to SQL server. Let us say the question comes here. I have a SQL server instance 1. Okay, so I told the default port is 1433. That my firewall is assigned a port for the first instance is 1433. I have another instance, I have installed one more instance with the SQL server, same edition, same version. that is SQL Server. The name is I have given as a SQL Server instance 3. The other one is I have a default instance. Now I have a 3 instances. Okay. So what number my firewall will assign to SQL Server if the TCP/IP protocol is enabled when the server is restart? So as I said, 1433 is the default port for SQL Server. That's why that is assigned to one already available SQL Server. So what about I freshly install 2 other instances? One is named instance, other one is default instances. So any guess what port it will be assigned? Ashwita? So you okay, so your answer is the same port name for 1433. Naga, so what about for default?
I'm thinking the same 1433.
1433. Fine.
Default.
Okay. Yeah. So now when I try to connect to the SQL Server instance 3, since this is a named instance, I have specified server name. Yeah, I will take that as a consideration. Then other answer, I don't. Who told 1433? Still, I am not familiar with the voices. So, who gave 1434?
Harita.
Okay, okay, Hatta. Yes, 1434. Okay, we will take it. So to connect the SQL Server, I have to give a computer name plus instance name. Okay, I have given. If I give this, it will use as per previous discussion. I mean, from the answers, we try to use 1433 port number to connect it. Right? Let me go back one step up. Yes, if you see here browser service, what the browser service do? If we can recall the browser service, listens for the incoming request for the SQL Server resource, provide the information about SQL Server instances. So it will read the existing connection and it will route to appropriate SQL Server instance. Let us say if the request is coming from the same server, local server, it will use shared memory. Agree? If the request is coming remotely, it has to use other protocol. The famous protocol that uses in the market is TCP/IP protocol. In the TCP/IP protocol, we specify IP address and port number to connect to the SQL server, either IP number or computer full name. So for that, what I need to do, I have to provide my computer full name and instance name. I have to specify the port number 1433. So that means if I give computer name and 1433 for SQL Server instance 1, I have given the same thing. For this also I have the same thing. This I have the same thing. So browser, how browser will detect and how it will connect to instance 1 or instance 3 or it will instance 3, instance default instance. How your connection will go? You have given, you try to launch your Gmail account. You have given a username and password. So you have a other account. There, if you give the same user identity else, so what will happen? It will try to launch you to the same account, not to the new one. Correct? So when you specify the computer name and port number 1433, it always try to connect to the same instance which is having the same port number 1433. So that, as we discussed, whenever you install multiple SQL Server instances, the name will be unique. Similarly, the port number will be unique for each SQL Server instance. When you keep it as a dynamic, so a port number will be assigned whenever the box get restarted. Who will take care? My Windows firewall settings will take care. In that case, 1433 will be assigned to only one SQL Server instance, not for all. Okay, let us say if it is assigned to first SQL Server instance, for this number, some other number. Okay, what other number it will assign? The answer from Harita is 1434. So it's not mandatory that a sequence number will be assigned to next SQL Server instance. That number can be any number from 1433 to 50,000. Any port number, my Windows firewall can assign any port number to SQL instance depending upon 1433 to 50,000. This is the range that has been allocated by International Port Authority to SQL Server. So we cannot decide if it is a dynamic port number. If it is a static port number, you can specify before restart itself, you are specifying a dedicated port number to your SQL Server. Like, let me go back to my configuration manager, and currently I am for a instance SQL Server instance 2. Here what I am trying to do here I am going to SQL Server properties. Can you please keep on mute? Yeah. Here we have to, if you keep as a static, whenever the box is restart, my Windows firewall automatically will assign a port from 1433 to 50,000 depending upon the availability. So if I keep as a dynamic port, this port will be assigned to my SQL Server when it gets restart. 1435. If I give 1435, this port is being assigned to the SQL Server instance 2. The changes will get reflect only after SQL Server restart. Okay, let us go back to SQL services. Restart the SQL services one more time. So these protocols used only to connect from client to the server. So SQL Server uses any of these 4 protocols to make a connection between client to the server. That client can be Management Studio or Command or any from the application. It will use any one of the application, any one of the protocol. So I think I'm sure you people might have heard about connection string. If you are using .NET or Java or any other application, I mean a programming application, you will say connection string. So connection string is nothing but a place where you specify the server's protocol type and server name and user ID, password, and the database name you will specify. So there you are specifying those details based on that. Whenever you make a connection, based on the protocol settings, based on the connection string, your application will connect to the database. So the connection string will use any one of these protocols. If it is a local system, that means if the client and the server both are in the same server, first preference it will use shared memory. If you specify to use TCP/IP in the local system itself, your SQL Server will use TCP/IP protocol. Now I have given a static port as static port as 1435 to my SQL Server instance. 1435. Let's verify that. We go back to SQL Server properties. We are in a not in a here protocols for SQL Server. We'll go back to TCP/IP protocol properties. IP address. Just Scroll down. If you see here, TCP/IP dynamic ports is 1435. Previously it was 0. It is assigned to 1435. Are clear? Now I have another instance. For this, the TCP/IP protocol is enabled. What I will do, I'll make it as dynamic. We will see what protocol it. So for this, TCP/IP is static. I'm removing it. Okay, I just kept as dynamic. So that means currently I haven't specified static means automatically it is dynamic, not for instance one. It started protocols for SQL Server instance one, TCP/IP. It is already enabled state. Still no port number to SQL Server. Why? The answer is whenever the box is restart, my firewall will assign a port number to SQL Server. Okay, so that range can be 1433 to 50,000. So for our SQL Server instance, I have given a port number as, that is static port number as 1535. Just remember the port number. The number I have given is 1435. So while connecting the SQL Server, if you want to use the TCP/IP protocol, if you give the SQL Server name, if it is a local server, the server and the client both are in SQL Server, it uses shared memory. Okay, if you in the local server, if you want to use TCP/IP protocol, you have to use your computer name plus TCP/IP. It uses IP and port number. IP or FQDN, fully qualified domain name. That means complete domain name. Here in this scenario, my computer name is this and the port number is 1435. Correct? So previously, in the previous attempts, what we did, we have given computer name plus correct SQL Server name I have specified to connect the SQL Server. So when I use that, since I am in a local server, it uses shared memory to connect it. So if I use computer name plus the port number 1535, it uses TCP/IP protocol to authenticate it. So plus, just for our understanding, you have to give followed by comma space. Okay, let us give the same thing. We try to connect it. Computer name comma space the port number 1435. Connected. Got it? And one more, either you can specify your computer name or IP address. IP address and port number 1435. Since I am in a local server, I need not to specify the complete number 10.20.30. And also let us see what is my port number CMD. I am opening a command prompt IP config in IP config. So currently my server is listening on port number 192. This is my current computer port number. So come back to this one. So it uses IP address and port number. IP address, comma 1435. This is how I need to specify to my SQL server to make a connection. Connected, right? Again, since I'm in a local to the server, I need not to specify complete name or port number. Simply a dot should be fine. Dot indicates local and connected. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here I have shown you 5 ways to connect to SQL Server. In all the 5 ways, we use different technique. In the first, the one which I have selected, here I have specified server name, that is computer name, and SQL Server instance with Windows authentication, that is the user which have a access to the box. The second connection, here we used server name, instance name with SQL authentication, that is SQL authenticated, built-in SQL authenticated user is SA. We made a connection. Next one, we used server name, that is computer name, and SQL Server port 1435 to make a connection. The other next time is we used port IP address and port number with Windows authentication. The next one is local and port number we have given. One more. I am not specifying anything. Simply I have given a dot and connected. Will it allow? Sirisha, any answer from you? I just gave a dot. So local. On local machine, I have more than one instance. So my browser service is getting confused. This connection is for which SQL server? So if any one of the SQL server instance is having 1433 as a default port, it will first try to connect as a default port. So if you don't specify the SQL server instance, it will try to connect default port if it is available. In my machine, currently, do we have any default instances? No, right? So the available instance both are named instance. If you see here, a name is available to both the SQL servers. If it is a default instance is available, if you give dot, that is a local computer, connect to local SQL server, that will try to connect your default port. In the scenario, I haven't specified any port number or any SQL server instance name to connect while connecting as a local. My browser got confused and it didn't authenticate push to any instance. It gave a throw-d error. The name is incorrect. Any questions till now on these protocols? Here we have used shared memory. SQL Server used shared memory. So and TCP/IP protocols. In the 5 connections, the first 2 are the examples for shared memory, because these 2 we have given. So these 2 we haven't specified port number. So simply we have given SQL Server computer name and SQL Server instance name. It uses by default shared memory. And if you specify IP address or fully qualified domain and port number, SQL Server try to use TCP/IP protocol. So other thing is that when you are here, we cannot say completely the SQL Server used TCP/IP protocol. The reason is that TCP/IP protocol mainly used when we try to connect the server remotely from a client. So when we try to connect from remotely, it uses TCP/IP protocol with the help of IP number and port number. When I try on a local machine, it will use shared memory. And the other one is, so let us go back to other protocols. Okay, the other one is named pipe. If you see here, in a name, a pipe is given to SQL Server. So by using that pipe name, you can run your queries or you can connect to SQL Server by using the pipe name specified to the SQL Server. And VIA, Virtual Interface Adapter. This is a hardware. That uses connection from the client to the SQL Server. So in most of the servers, we will not use VIA. And coming features from 2016, this protocol is completely removed from SQL Server protocols. So VIA is a hardware, virtual interface adapter, that require a compatibility with the hardware. So we can ignore about VIA. So SQL Server mainly uses shared memory or TCP/IP protocol. If you want to use a named pipe, you have to specify a pipe name to make a connection between client and server. So the pipe name is available. If you go to properties, here you can see a pipe name. By using this, you can write a query on the against SQL Server instance. When we use the SQL Server shared memory, when you are connecting to the SQL Server from a local machine, it will use shared memory. When you are trying from remotely from a client to the server, it uses TCP/IP protocol. So TCP/IP protocol mainly functions with the IP number and the port number, or else fully qualified domain name and port number. It authenticates with the unique port number. So the default port number for the SQL Server is 1433. If the 1433 is not available, a unique number can be assigned to the SQL Server. The range can be 1433 to 50,000. Any number can be assigned. So dynamic port number and static port number. The dynamic port number, a predefined port is not being allocated to SQL Server. Whenever the SQL Server when it restarts, box is restarts, my firewall, Windows firewall will assign a port to the SQL Server. Whereas in the static, we are predefining the port number to the SQL Server. Now the question is, which protocol is preferred? Which port is preferred? Is a static port number or dynamic port number? Sirisha?
Yeah.
Which protocol is which port number is preferred? Is it static or dynamic?
I think it's static.
Yes, absolutely correct. Dynamic. Whenever you try to connect, let us say if Gmail is using, Google is using different port number. Whenever you try to connect your Gmail, every time if you try to specify new port number, every time you have to contact call center and what is the current port number, or else you have to set somewhere and have to use the port number. If it is a static, always it will try to use the same port number whenever you make a connection.
Yeah.
So it's a preferred to it's all the applications is preferred to have a static port number. So one time you will communicate to the client or end user, boss, you use this IPA number and port number to connect the SQL Server. Boss, there ends the story. So if it is keep a dynamic, every time SQL Server restart or box restart, a new port number will be assigned. The user when try to connect the database, he will fail. Again, he will reach DBA or he needs to check the port number every time when the server is restart. So it's preferred to have static port number.
Yeah.
Okay. So the from till here we can end up our today's module. So today we have learned about system SQL Server configuration manager, how we can manage the SQL services and the client protocols, and how can we change the account settings for the SQL Server. So these are the things we have managed via SQL Server configuration manager. Any questions in this topic, today's module? Okay, if no questions by Wednesday, if you by any chance if you can able to install the SQL Server on your machine, so how many ways, I want to know how many ways we can find the SQL port number. One, I have showed you by going to Configuration Manager, right click on it, TCP/IP protocol, properties, we can see whether it is a static or dynamic. Apart from that, how many ways we can find a SQL Server port is static or dynamic, or what kind of port number it is assigned. Okay, if you can able to load SQL Server on your machine after the installation, after your configuration, uh, try the possible ways to find this to answer this question. Okay, we will come, I mean, I will meet you on Wednesday. Okay, so if a few of you, if you want class tomorrow to have the installation on your machine, so just communicate with Dharma when he try to reach you, and we can have a 30 minutes or 40-minute session to totally to install SQL Server on your machine. So Naga, you are telling like you are having challenges in installation. So that is totally related to your computer. Just check the network security and firewall settings and try to do a attempt. If still you are encountering the same issue, so please send me the error message, or else we will see on that on Wednesday.
Okay.
So if no questions, so we can wind up today's call. Already we are 4 minutes ahead today's schedule.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Srinivas, and tomorrow who is coming? You're helping whom, like to install a SQL Server?
Ashwita and Pooja, they have classes till 10, so they couldn't able to attend. Am I speaking to Naga, right? Yeah. I think Dharma can contact you. So who else is available? Naveen and Naga. Okay. So if you want, you can tell your availability to Dharma, so he can schedule a quick session, a 30 minutes. Maybe he can schedule a 30 minutes and he can make you as a presenter, so that I can see what error you are encountering and we will try to fix that.
Okay. I'll talk to Dharma. Thank you so much.
Okay, he will reach you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.